saying, quote, "I never met with any Russian officials to discuss issues of the campaign. I have no idea what this allegation is about. It is false." Still, some Democratic leaders are calling on Sessions to resign.
It would be better for the country if he'd resign.
He has proved that he is unqualified and unfit to serve in that position of trust.
Now, it's not uncommon for attorneys general to recuse themselves from specific cases. In fact, others have recused themselves several times during their tenure, including President Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder. Typically, a U.S. attorney or the deputy attorney general would help oversee the investigation. For context there, Wolf.
All right, good context. Thanks very much, Pamela Brown, reporting for us. There's more breaking news tonight about other members of the Trump campaign who also met with the Russian ambassador to the United States. Let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. Jim, you just spoke to one of those advisors. What are you learning?
Right. That's right, Wolf. I just got off the phone with J.D. Gordon, who served as a national security advisor to the Trump campaign before the election. He's no longer with Donald Trump or the administration at this point. But he does tell me, Wolf, that over the summer at the Republican convention in Cleveland, that he did have a conversation with the Russian ambassador as well as other national security advisors for President, then candidate Trump at the time, Carter Page and Waleed Phares. They all met at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland for a gathering there. And then J.D. Gordon says he met again with the ambassador at a cocktail reception later on that evening in Cleveland. All of this going on during the Republican convention. And then Gordon says that he was a part of the effort that was pushed by the Trump campaign to put some language in the GOP platform that essentially said that the Republican Party did not advocate for arming the Ukrainians in their battle against those pro-Russian separatists. Of course, that was a big issue that was flaring up at the time of the Republican convention. That effort was ultimately successful. They were successful in having that language in the Republican Party platform. And I asked J.D. Gordon, well, why is that? Why did you go ahead and advocate for that language? And he said that this is the language that Donald Trump himself wanted and advocated for back in March at a meeting at the Unfinished Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C. J.D. Gordon says then candidate Trump said he did not want to, quote, go to World War III over Ukraine. And so J.D. Gordon says at the Republican convention in Cleveland, he advocated for language in that Republican Party platform that reflected then candidate Trump's comments. And I can tell you, Wolf, going on about this, I asked J.D. Gordon, were there any conversations with the Russian ambassador that he would view as inappropriate? Was there any chatter about quid pro quo, colluding with the Russians to help the Trump campaign? J.D. Gordon says, absolutely not. That would have been inappropriate. He said that his comments to the Russian ambassador were essentially what he was saying publicly on panels and in TV interviews, that the U.S. and Russia should have a better relationship. And Wolf, I can tell you this, that the White House is aware of J.D. Gordon's comments. We should report that they were first reported in the USA Today newspaper. But J.D. Gordon did tell me that he had a conversation with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the principal deputy press secretary over here at the White House, to brief her on his conversations with the Russian ambassador and that other national security advisors to the candidate at the time, that did occur over the summer, Wolf.
Jim, a senior administration official is also confirming a meeting between that same Russian ambassador at Trump Tower in December with Trump officials, Trump advisors. Tell us about that.
That's right. This was first reported in the New York Times, but CNN has been able to confirm through a senior administration official. My colleague Sarah Murray was able to confirm this, that yes, in fact, Michael Flynn, who was a national security advisor, not the official national security advisor, but was a top advisor to President-elect Trump back in December, along with Jared Kushner, the president-elect's son-in-law at the time, met with the Russian ambassador at Trump Tower in December. That is now being confirmed by the White House through a senior administration official. So it does appear, Wolf, that there have been multiple contacts, as we've been reporting all along, multiple contacts between the Russians and top advisors to the president-elect and then candidate Trump over the summer last year.
Yeah, that Russian ambassador must have been pretty busy with all of those meetings. Jim, all of this comes, this latest uproar, as the president traveled today to Newport News, Virginia. You were with him on that trip. You had a chance to ask him about the Attorney General.
That's right, Wolf. We traveled with the president down to Newport News. He toured the soon-to-be commissioned USS Gerald R. Ford, and it was during that tour of that aircraft carrier that we asked the president about the Attorney General and whether or not he had acted appropriately. I asked the president whether Jeff Sessions still has the confidence of the president. He said yes, he has confidence in Jeff Sessions. Here's more of what he had to say. Mr. President, do you still have confidence in the Attorney General?
Total.
Mr. President, should Sessions recuse himself from investigations into your campaign in Russia?
I don't think so at all.
When did you first learn that Sessions spoke to the Russian ambassador? Did you know during the campaign?
I don't think he should do that at all.
When were you aware that he spoke to the Russian ambassador?
I wasn't aware at all.
When did you find
Do you
out?
think he should have spoken truthfully about whether he had spoken to the ambassador?
I think he probably did.
Now, we should point out on the way back to Washington, Wolf, back to Joint Base Andrews on Air Force One, the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer did hold a brief gaggle with reporters. He continued to insist that there is, quote, no there when it comes to this investigation into ties or contacts between the Trump campaign, Trump advisors, and the Russians. But clearly, Wolf, when you have the Attorney General recusing himself, when you have national security advisors over the summer meeting with the Russian ambassador during the Republican convention, there is some there, Wolf.
Jim Acosta over at the White House, thanks for that reporting. We're joined now by Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He's a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks very much for coming in. I'll get to Sessions in a moment, but what do you make of all of these meetings that the Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak, had with several Trump campaign advisors during the Republican convention in Cleveland, and then another meeting with Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, top advisor to the president right now, Michael Flynn, now the former national security advisor, in December over at Trump Tower in New York. Meetings we didn't know about earlier, but seems they're coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I wish the administration would just release basically any contact that's ever happened just to get them out there. I don't necessarily know if these meetings are improper or not. We need to have more information. Jared Kushner was acting as basically an ambassador for the incoming administration. They have every right to talk to the Russians in this process to say, hey, maybe this is what we're looking for in a new relationship in the future. And the ambassador is doing his job trying to talk to people in that too. I've met with a Russian ambassador in the past. I was in fact asked today by a fellow colleague if I'd meet with a Russian ambassador again. I won't do it now because I don't meet with regimes that murder people. But, you know, these are kind of contacts that are normal. But in terms of if there's anything else nefarious here, we need to let the House and Senate Intel committees do their job in a bipartisan way.
Did the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, go far enough today by simply recusing himself from any future investigations involving Trump campaign officials and the Russians?
I think he did. I think the recusal was the right move. It doesn't say that he's necessarily admitting guilt. He's saying, look, we need a process to go forward that people can trust and have faith in, and I'm a distraction to that, and there are plenty of people capable of shepherding this through. I think it was the right move to do for him to recuse himself. In terms of what the thing that concerns me right now is you have some on the right and some on the left that are turning this whole thing into a partisan fight. Some folks over here say that there's no, don't look at the Russians at all, it doesn't matter. And you have some over here saying the Russians basically ran the Trump campaign and Jeff Sessions needs to resign. We need to be calm and move this back to the middle in a bipartisan way so we can have real answers for the American people.
He's the top law enforcement officer in the country, and the accusation against him is that on 2 occasions during his confirmation hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee, he did not tell the full truth.
Yeah, well, I certainly think he wishes he could go back and specify that more. In terms of how I've seen it, is it technically perjury? I don't know. I don't think so. I think what you have to have intent. And what it seemed like to me is they were in a discussion with Senator Franken about the campaign's interaction with the Russians. And when he was asked about interaction with the Russians, in fact, he wasn't thinking in his term as a U.S. senator. Now, is he clarifying that? It sounds like he's going to from his press conference, but I don't know if that necessarily constitutes perjury or a reason to resign.
Yeah, what he said today is what he should have done when asked by Senator Al Franken, Senator Patrick Leahy about contacts with Russia, denied having contacts with Russia. He should have said, well, I didn't have any contacts with Russia this is what he should have said, in my opinion. I didn't have any contacts with Russia involving the campaign. I spoke about Ukraine, other national security issues in my capacity as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But I did have those meetings. Campaign-related issues didn't come up. Now he wishes he would have done that. He should have done that then.
Well, he should have, but I mean, again, it's all about intent in terms of whether this was a lie or perjury. And you look at it from the perspective of these accusations have been coming down about massive campaign collusion with the Russians. And I think if he, in fact, is totally innocent of that, he's thinking of it from a perspective of saying, if you're trying to involve me in somehow that I'm in this massive collusion, I haven't had any contacts with the Russians about this campaign. Forgetting, of course, that as a U.S. senator, you have sometimes casual interactions with these.
But just to be precise, when Senator Leahy, in a written question to him, said, have you been in contact with anyone connected to any part of the Russian government about the 2016 election, either before or after Election Day? He said in his answer, no.
Right.
No. What he should have said, what would you have said?
Well, I would have said I've had contacts with a Russian ambassador. Now, in that question, it says about the 2016 election.
Right.
He can say, there were superficial comments. About every meeting with an ambassador I have, we talk about the presidential election before it happened, just in terms of, can you believe how this is going? So I don't, again, in terms of the 2016 election thing, it's really kind of up to
because I'm interested now, because he says he did not talk about the campaign in that meeting with the Russian ambassador. The Russian ambassador, Kislyak, came to his office in the Senate. He said he had two of his senior aides in the room for that meeting, two retired colonels. You know colonels, I know colonels. They're in a meeting between a top senator and a Russian ambassador. They take notes. I'm anxious to see if they're going to release those contemporaneous notes, to see if the senator is telling the truth, that they only discussed Ukraine, other national security issues, did not get into the campaign at all. You'd like to see those notes
as well. I would, if those notes exist. I can't promise they do.
But you assume they did take notes.
They could. I've had meetings with ambassadors where we're not taking notes, we're just talking about contemporaneous issues. But if they exist, of course. I really think we need a full accounting. So in a bipartisan way, which is why I'm trying to corral everybody against kind of the hysterics of calling for resignations and making accusations. We need the answers to this. Not just Congress, but the American people want it. They want to know where this is and if it warrants any further action.
Because there are 26 members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and based on the Washington Post reporting, they've checked our reporting. It looks like he's the only senator that actually met with the Russian ambassador. Usually the Russian ambassador meets with representatives from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Yeah, well, I've heard reports that a senator from Missouri claimed she had never met with him, and then in fact on Twitter had said
that's Claire
she had.
McCaskill.
Right. Now, I don't know, these are just reports I've seen, but it is natural within the course of doing work to meet with ambassadors. I'm not excusing what was said in the committee. I'm also saying we just need a calm answer to this instead of jumping to very fast conclusions.
Because it's interesting, originally in a statement that they put out, he said he didn't recall details about the meeting, but now he's apparently recalling a lot of details about the meeting as he's you're smiling when I'm mentioning that.
Well, I'm laughing just because that is funny, but I also think too about meetings I have, and I have no memory sometimes of some of the things I did yesterday in terms of meetings with folks, and then when you think about it, you can come up with it. But again, what I want is a full accounting in a bipartisan way of what contacts the Trump campaign had or didn't have, because it will serve to put this to bed once and for all.
Your colleague, Darrell Issa, Republican congressman, thinks a special prosecutor is justified right now. Do you agree?
Not right now. I think, again, and I've heard Democratic members of the Senate Intel Committee say, let's let the Intel committees do their work on the Senate and the House side. Let them come to a full accounting, get the information they need. They have the area to do it in terms of classification. If we're not happy with the results, or we believe that this was not done correctly, then that may be a next step. But I think this is the perfect place to do this work without turning it into, again, just a big partisan food fight.
Very interesting final subject on Obamacare, repealing and replacing. Senator Rand Paul, Republican, as you know, he marched over to the House side today of the Capitol. He wanted to see a copy of the House bill to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that's now being reviewed by Republicans in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. I believe you're a member of that committee. Yeah. As a member of the committee, did you see a version of the House Obamacare repeal bill because he is very angry they did not allow him to see that.
So he's the master of theatrics, right? This is Rand Paul getting his name out there again, walking over with a bunch of cameras and trying to make a big scene. This is what he does. I have seen a copy of the draft. We're looking at it. We're in discussions right now in terms of, is this the final thing? Is this what it's going to look like? Where are we going to go from here? It is not in the Senate. So the idea that a senator can come over and bust into the House of Representatives and say, I'm going to involve myself in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. This is coming out very soon. People will know the details, and we'll be able to have that discussion.
Adam Kinzinger, thanks very much for joining us.
Anytime, thanks.
Just ahead, we'll have more on the Attorney General. The bombshell developments today, his recusal decision, and the Trump campaign contacts with Russia that we're just learning about tonight. Stay with us.